Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the stage here at Glee 2021. And hello to everyone joining us virtually via the Glee Connect app. If you are joining us virtually, please don't forget to get your questions in via the Ask the Speaker function. To kick off the exhibition, we have David Denny, Futures and Sustainability Manager of HTA. So please put your hands together for David, please.
Okay, good morning everyone, and thanks for coming. So just to kind of clarify what we're going to be talking about, my name's Dave, I work at the HTA and I look at a lot of the market research and trends that we have a look at. To clarify, we will be looking at growing a green economy, but very much through the prism of the demographic change in gardeners that we're looking at. So if any of you are kind of panicking, having a look at that, don't worry, it's all coming. So what we're going to have a look at is really our industry and where it was pre-pandemic, what some of the trends are that were energised through pandemic and how that is really driving potential for growth, not just amongst kind of what we would call traditional gardeners, but also against some new demographics who over the last year, 18 months, in many cases have got into gardening for the first time. So probably worth recapping a little bit about our industry, because I find sometimes being quite close into it, we kind of lose touch with just how big, just how impactful it is in terms of the general public. So a few numbers. I'm the sort of guy who likes numbers. What is our garden space like? What does it look like if you put it end to end? Well, 630,000 hectares of garden space allotments in the UK. And that's 3 times the area of Greater London as domestic gardens. Now, one of the things that we saw in the pandemic was an uptake in use of those green spaces. So it was absolutely an outlet for stress, for creativity, for just being together as a family. And so really bringing to the fore just how much of a natural national asset those domestic green spaces are. So very, very substantial area. What do we spend on those areas? £6 billion in round numbers from consumers, and that's just on the plants and the products that go into them. It's not on the garden and maintenance services, it's not on the design, it's not on the barbecues and the burgers that people like me have been eating in the pandemic to enjoy those spaces. So very, very substantial part of the retail space and a very substantial part of our economy. And when you look at the value of the industry, you know, in terms of UK GDP, anyone care to hazard a guess about what sort of proportion of the entire UK economy horticulture and landscaping is? Okay, well, there's one thing that the pandemic hasn't changed. It's the number of willing volunteers when I ask that sort of question. And also the kind of safety zone at the front of the presentation, which was also there before social distancing, in case I was going to pick on anyone. But don't worry, do not worry, I'm not going to pick on you, unless you're a HTA colleague who should know this stuff. It's £1 in every 62 in the UK economy gets spent on the kind of gardening, landscaping and horticulture industry. So absolutely massive there in terms of jobs provision and the different sides of things that we look at. Now, how does that split out? Well, if I was doing this presentation about a year ago, I would have gone with Office of National Statistics presentations that say there are about 25 million people take part in gardening, not including children. Over the pandemic, we've seen that energised. There were 3 million new adult gardeners, according to HTA research, not including the number of children who've got into those sorts of initiatives through school gardening and so on and so forth. So huge increase in the levels of participation that we've seen over the last year, 18 months. Now, one of the things that we've been doing as HTA, along with RHS, NFU and the Ornamental Horticulture Roundtable, is really having a look at how that increase in participation in gardening, the drivers, the health, well-being, concern with the environment, presents our industry with a real opportunity to engage with the public, to engage with media, to engage with policymakers, and really demonstrate just how big of an impact we have in terms of, yes, absolutely gardeners, absolutely the economy, but also in terms of the sorts of solutions that enables us to talk to around climate change mitigation, around the health benefits of our green spaces. You know, we would have seen over the general election the kind of I think, called it tree wars. So which party was going to promise to plant the most trees in here? But that increase in gardening participation is really starting to come more and more to the fore about policy, about planning, about green economy. And so one of the things that we'll start to see in this presentation is just how those sorts of trends connect with each other. It's not just about gardening, it's not just about what people will put into that. It's about trying to connect that in to really promote the place of our industry in that whole agenda. So I used a soundbite. I was guilty of that, and I wouldn't be a kind of true market researcher if I didn't follow it up with a chart. So who are those 3 million gardeners who say they want to do more? Well, as much as I'd love to say there's an easy answer, that it's just younger people who've got into it, the truth is that really across all the age ranges, a lot more people got into gardening, a lot more people intending to do more gardening going forward. This is the results of a survey run by Foresight Factory, so it's not HTA data, it's not the kind of the HTA propaganda promoting gardening. This is an independent agency done this. And the green shows the percentage of people looking to do more gardening than they were pre-pandemic. The red, less, and the yellow, more or less the same. So really across those age groups, we've seen that trend towards gardening, that appetite to doing something really energised. For sure, it is emphasised at those younger demographics, and we'll have a look at that in a second about what gardening means to different consumers and some of the opportunities around that. Next one is really one of my favourite graphs. Yep, I am the sort of person who has a list of favourite graphs. And this is a view of the UK population. It's not a picture of the Empire State Building, as was questioned to me in rehearsing for this one. And what it shows, if I was tall enough to reach it, you'd see the peak at around 70. So that's the post-war baby boom. Everyone returns from the war, resumes what they'd been putting off, so to speak. But we also see that it's an uneven distribution. We have bulges in that population that present opportunities for our industry. Now, first of those is the baby boomers. Now, over the next 10 years, we're going to see another 3 million or so people go into that traditional gardening age, what we might call the gardening elders, the people who have really built gardening as a hobby. They own their own homes, they're into the plantsmanship, the stewardship, learning the gardening skills, and that should be a huge opportunity for our industry. We can't assume that those people will naturally come into gardening, as I'll go on to in a second. There's increasing competition for that leisure pound, but a huge demographic opportunity over the next few years, which really should stand our industry in good stead to play its part in that green recovery, in terms of green job creation, and in terms of people playing their part in nature-based solutions. There's another pick as well, that over the next 10 years, there's going to be another million or so people coming into that age group where you're just starting to get into gardening for the first time. You're on the housing ladder, you've got kids, you're kind of a couple, so you're using your garden for very, very different things than perhaps you would be as you're approaching retirement. It's very different gardening formats, and very different opportunities in terms of the solutions, the propositions that we present to engage and retain those consumers in gardening and bring them through. I want to have a look at one of the trends which we'd call the Ageless Society. And really, although we're talking in terms of demographics and age and life stage, etc., one of the things that we're finding is that consumers feel less and less likely to agree that they want to be defined by their age. So how are we seeing that? So again, some global research, 73% of consumers agree that they do not want to be defined by their age, by brand, by public sector providers, by the way they're kind of talked to and engaged with. Now, there's an example here from Sweden. We are the Silver Snipers. So, believe it or not, they're looking extremely good for it. All of those people are over 74. They're engaged in online gaming, believe it or not. But it's a community, it's addressing that need for leisure time, community connections, but again, kind of defying those sort of stereotypes that we would have about what are people going to be doing when they approach retirement. What else are we looking at? Hands up. I won't pick anyone. Anyone watch the Olympics? Yeah, good. Anyone watch the triathlon? Some great medals there. Yeah. It's quite interesting. This is British Triathlon's Get Involved page, and it doesn't have the imagery of impossibly good-looking and fit kind of Olympic gold medalists. It is people who, well, at least in my head, they're older than me, but probably realistically they are about my age. But it is about that active participation. It's about encouraging people with that kind of leisure time, the drive to kind of connect with the outdoors, to remain fit, to retain those active lifestyles, to get involved. And there's quite an important part in this for us as our industry. Probably when I was saying there's a great opportunity with those older consumers, you know, their natural territory for gardening, they're natural territory for a lot of other leisure sectors as well. And increasingly there's that need for any kind of sector, any leisure industry aiming to compete for their leisure pound, their leisure time, to attune themselves to how they see themselves, how they want to see themselves, the lifestyles they want to lead. And so really thinking about what gardening means in terms of is it exercise, is it connection with nature, is it active lifestyle, rather than is it something that yeah, we could complacently just assume that people will get into. It is probably a real opportunity, but also a challenge for us. We're not the only industry aiming to satisfy the wants and needs of these consumers. When I'm talking about younger consumers, again, what do I mean by this? And again, there's different types of younger consumers that we'll look at. One of the things that the HTA offers as a member benefit is we call it the garden consumer segmentation. And we've got kind of 8 or 9 different categories there. 2 of them on show here we're calling family focus. So they about 9% of British households, but they're accounting for about 12% of garden retail spend. And to be honest, it's probably re-energised, it's probably more than that since the pandemic. But what they're looking to get from their gardens is that family space for the children, family space for kind of mum and dad to come and visit, and the sorts of solutions that they're looking at are something that will, you know, perhaps survive, little Timmy knocking his football around the garden. It's also about the kind of family space, it's the barbecues, and it's probably about all the sorts of things that they're going to bring home from the kids' gardening club as well. So the motivations for wanting to garden there are very, very subtly different. Alfresco aspirations, on the other hand, probably city living, renting maybe, certainly on the kind of first stages of the housing ladder, flats, balconies, so that kind of format for the garden, what that looks like, fundamentally different to what we might see in later life stages. And we've really seen that that's quite a global trend with the houseplant side of things. Now, I won't labour the statistics on houseplants. I think everyone around the show will know that that has been a very, very strong category over a number of years. But again, it's tapping into that sense of connection with nature that perhaps if you're living in flats, in small houses, etc., perhaps without much of a garden, you know, the end of the bookcase, the balcony, or even the kind of home working space over the last 18 months has been that opportunity to get that sense for greenery and get that home styling approach into your life. One of the things that we've seen unifying those age groups, however, has been probably the increasing, I suppose, connection with nature that has been driving some of that kind of gardening wants and needs. Now, for sure, a lot of that isn't new. You know, the wild bird care category, you know, that's absolutely not a new thing about that connection with nature, stewardship, wanting to bring wildlife into the garden, etc. But probably with those younger consumers, it's been energised by the pandemic about wanting to just connect with nature, wanting to get into the outside, has combined with greater awareness within the media, within social media channels, about that immediacy of the impact of climate change. So the following graph really does show that consumer concern in the UK with the environment, with pollution, with climate change has been really steadily rising over 20, 30 years and really has not really been hit by the pandemic. What this chart shows, it's from Ipsos Mori's kind of issues index, so they ask about all sorts of things within there, the economy, education, policing, immigration, etc. And they ask people fairly straightforward questions, you know, what are the following, you know, which issues are most important to you in your day-to-day life? What are you worried about? Now, no prizes for guessing what was top of the chart, so to speak, round about here. It was the pandemic, the NHS, etc. But what we've seen in the past is that there's been quite a strong correlation with concern for the environment when the economy was doing well. This peak over here, or this dip, coincides with the credit crunch. Once the economy was on the ropes, concern for the environment tended to drop off, and we really haven't seen that this time around. It's really as high as it has ever been and has quickly got back to that. So that concern, that immediacy for climate change really just seemed to be an ever-present going through that. So that's an opportunity, that's clearly a perception, but what does the great British public think about us as an industry? I'm going to do my level best to pick on someone if no one volunteers on this one. What sort of percentage of the general public do you think would see garden industry as an environmentally friendly industry? 80%. Okay. Any other takers on that one? 65. Okay, we're going slowly the wrong way, but okay. So the question we asked in this consumer survey of around 2,000 adults, is we asked two. We asked how important is it for different industries to be environmentally friendly, and then we asked them, and is it environmentally friendly? And so what I'm going to show you here is it was a 1 to 5 scale. So 4 and 5 is the people who say it's either important or very important, and 4 and 5 on the other one is it environmentally friendly or very environmentally friendly. And where we're seeing kind of garden centres, garden brands is on the horizontal axis. To all intents and purposes, everyone thinks it's important that every industry is environmentally friendly. There's no less disagreement or agreement with that for us compared with the fashion industry, compared with the automotive industry. But it's around about half of the consumers think that the garden industry is environmentally friendly. Most of the rest are undecided. There's very, very few people who think that we are not environmentally friendly. So on the one hand, that is a tremendous gift. It is tremendous voting confidence for us as an industry that we're presenting those products, we're presenting those solutions, we're presenting that lifestyle that caters to the wants and needs of the great British public in terms of wanting to do its bit for climate change. Still further to go. We were saying we were hoping that would be about 80%, 65%. So what is it that we need to do going forward to show that we're part of that movement, to show that it's part of the green recovery, and to really kind of galvanise the great British public into that? Conversely, what if we don't measure up to those expectations? What if in a world of kind of greater transparency in our supply chains, in terms of scrutiny, in terms of fact-checking, what if we don't do that? So it's a great place to be, it's a great opportunity, but probably a challenge as well about how we build sustainable business into the kind of brands and customer-facing, consumer-facing solutions we provide. Now, there clearly is a lot of substance to this, so and a lot of opportunity. So anyone know what this is? Okay, anyone from the Royal Botanical Garden in Edinburgh here? Well, I'm kind of glad because this is one of their gardens. If they didn't know what this is, I'd be very, very upset and embarrassed. But this is a rainwater garden. So it's designed specifically in terms of the format, the planting, to alleviate flash flooding in those urban situations. So again, beautiful aesthetic, kind of beautiful kind of plants there, but again, planting with a purpose. So in terms of those kind of urban areas where we've paved over our front gardens, what are the opportunities going forward to kind of re-green different parts of the UK whilst still satisfying that need for that connection with nature? However, as I say, how do we stand up to scrutiny? One of the increasing things that we'll need to kind of guard against as the public becomes more critical, as the media, as NGOs engage with this, is rightly, how do we back up those claims? So a number of you will have probably seen that the Competitions and Market Authority is consulting at the moment with industry, with the economy in the widest sense, about standards over green claims. So what do you need to be able to demonstrate in order to say that your product is, for example, green or environmentally friendly? So at the moment that is in the consultation stage, but that whole space about being able to kind of back up what you claim is probably an area over the coming years that will get more scrutiny, will get more formalised into marketing, brand claims, so on and so forth. There's quite a eye-opening account here that in the initial investigations that they did around this, they found that around 40% of green claims made, and bear in mind this is the whole economy, not horticulture, 40% of those claims were potentially misleading. So again, expect kind of greater standards on this to kind of guard against greenwash. So again, what are we looking at if we're going to summarise some of these things up? What does it mean for us going forward, both in the short term and in the longer term? Well, I think it's fairly clear there's some massive opportunities here related to the demographics, related to the different participation, related to really understanding and satisfying those consumers' needs. Massive opportunity there for us. But again, as we've said, we need to be, I suppose, agile. We need to reinvent ourselves. We need to think about, well, what are the alternative choices that our demographics have they're available in terms of how they spend their leisure pound, in terms of how they spend their leisure time, and in terms of what their expectations are right now of us and how those are going to change and probably increase over time. Sustainability, environment, that does seem to be something that's kind of going through the generations. So there's quite a kind of common view that concern with the environment is a young person's thing. It's something that we really need to do to get into younger consumers' heads, and that's absolutely true. But it's also a case that it's a very, very strong motivating factor for those older consumers, in many senses more so than some younger demographics. And really when you delve into that with some of the qualitative research, it's that sense of stewardship, about passing something on, about leaving the planet in a better place than you found it. So again, going away from sort of, I suppose, easy thinking about the environment, sustainability is a younger person's thing. Yes, to an extent, but it cuts across those age ranges. And lastly, and probably the takeaway point from this, in order to really take advantage of those opportunities, to remain relevant to consumers of different types, and indeed to our other stakeholders, people that want to work in the industry, government who have the tremendous opportunity to help us realise our potential. How do we stay agile? How do we reinvent ourselves? How do we really tell compelling stories to do justice to the potential that we have? So I think that's it from me. I notice there's more people in the front row now that it's a little bit safer that I'm not going to ask any questions. So I'll end by saying thank you for your time, and it's your turn to put me on the spot with any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Do we have any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Ooh, yes, at the back.
Sorry for being outside the ring, so to speak. Just a quick one, looking at your data generally about the environment. To what extent was that split out for wildlife and biodiversity? As we're in a biodiversity crisis, of course.
Do you mean what type of, to what extent is the purchasing driven by that concern for biodiversity?
Yes, yeah, thanks.
I wouldn't be able to put a percentage on it for you. There's all sorts of things going to get traded off there. I think what's very clear when you go around the retail environment is the level of innovation and uptake of products that you wouldn't have seen geared to that, whether that's going to be friendly hotels, plants for pollinators. There's great. I don't want to sort of pull brands out of the air, but a certain national seed manufacturer has a beautiful point of sale display with the pegs that have got the packets of seeds explicitly that are good for pollinators, for insects. So I think it is an increasing driver of choice. For sure, it's not the only one. We're looking at, say, plants for purposes in terms of flood alleviation, urban cooling effects, but we're certainly noticing that more and more. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Is there anything in the data about where people are getting their information about these environmental side, the biodiversity side? Where are they going to get their resources and information?
There is, and I'm going to give our PR people a bit of a heart failure now. I'm going to sort of release something early. There we go. No, it's also early, but like one of the things we do track every year through a consumer survey is where do consumers get their advice, inspirations from. There's kind of a few key staples within that. So friends and family is one, and one of the things that we see is younger consumers are sourcing advice, information from friends and family. Quite often that's an older relative, an older trusted relative, mum, dad, etc., who's also going to see their garden as a bit of a blank canvas. But we also see that amongst older generations as well, and part of that is the connectedness. We've seen the Instagram communities there, so certainly amongst some of the older demographics, it's around communities, sell things. There's also a few generalizations that increasingly, I suppose, self-help. So your YouTube videos, your online communities are there. And that's a double-edged sword, of course. You're into the realms of, well, is that someone's opinion about what works, or is that actually... But increasingly they are there. But there's also some interesting stuff about garden centres and garden centres staff. So about 9% from memory of people are listing those guys as a source of advice, inspiration, expertise. But also increasingly garden centres, websites and social media. So that kind of garden centre staff as a trusted source of expertise, advice is certainly very powerful. To the theme of the gentleman raised earlier, NGOs, those environmental charities also increasingly seen as that. So it's a patchwork of different sources of information. So probably an opportunity for us to start to bring that together with some consistent messaging. Okay, thanks.
Any more? No, I think we'll leave it there. David and his colleagues are just based next to our stage at the HTA stand. So if you do want to go say hello to him, please do. And a big round of applause once again for David, please.
Thank you.